Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Social Work Bubble podcast. I'm your host, Laura, a licensed master social worker here in New York. And today we welcome a special guest, Danielle, an LCMFT, who will be talking about some really important things: perfectionism, codependency, disrupting cycles of self-neglect and shame. So a really exciting talk we have ahead of us. Thank you so much, Danielle, for coming on today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I love
Yay.
having these conversations. Yes, let's
So
challenge
important.
the stuff.
Absolutely. Now, before we dive in, for those listening, don't forget to like, share, and follow the podcast on whatever platform you're using, and we will jump in. Now, Danielle, as we get started, can you just introduce yourself, your background, and what you're currently doing?
Sure. Hey, y'all. I'm Danielle Branche-Brown. I am a marriage and family therapist, and I am also a wellness coach. So I do a lot of work around self-care and helping people challenge self-limiting beliefs, perfectionism, codependency, things like that.
Mhm.
And then specifically for therapists, I really like to hold space for really challenging perfectionism, unrealistic expectations, right? Imposter syndrome and self-neglect, all these things that a lot of times we either come in with already and then they sort of get escalated in our
Mhm.
careers. Um, or we develop those, right, because of
Yeah,
some of the stuff that happens in our field. But yeah, but thanks for having me. I'm very excited. I'm the
absolutely.
owner of Branches of Life Therapy, and Branches of Life Wellness. So that is me.
Oh, great. I love that because your last name is Branch. So it
Yes, yes.
makes so great.
It's on purpose.
Oh, that's so great. All right. Well, first, kind of diving into the perfectionism piece, because I think that's something I've seen a lot of, not just social workers, people in the mental health world struggle with, not only with clients that we work with, but within ourselves. What have you noticed are the biggest influences of perfectionism for people?
So, like, first, I'll come at it from a personal angle,
Mhm.
right? Because I know exactly where my perfectionism comes from, right? Or came from, right? I'm
That's fine.
recovering perfectionist over here, okay? So mine really came directly from uh having critical parenting, right? And my mom and I have had lots and lots of conversations about this. I wrote a
Yeah.
book called And I Still Love You, The Art of Loving Imperfect People, where I
Oh,
really
great.
illustrate a lot of it in there. But it really, for me personally, came from my mother's fear,
Hmm.
right? My mom wanted great things for me, right? And it came from not a space of like abundantly knowing it could be,
Hmm.
but it came from a fear that it wouldn't be so,
Hmm.
right? And so I think because of that, there was a lot of like strict, rigid structuring. There was a lot of unrealistic expectations placed on me as a kid. Also just like cultural stuff,
Hmm.
growing up not with a whole lot of money,
Hmm.
black single mom, right? Like so a lot of like different contextual variables that
Hmm.
come into play here. But I think all in all, the sort of lack of um like choice, freedom, autonomy, flexibility, um, and like and honestly, the ability to just fuck up and like somebody
Yeah.
be like, that's so like I know that doesn't feel good, and
Hmm.
also that's okay, right? I
Yeah.
still love you. And so I think failure as a thing became this in like imaginary monster of a thing,
Hmm.
right? And it was held up by shame,
Yeah,
right? So it had
absolutely.
fear, shame, like unrealistic
Mhm.
expectations. So that's for me personally where my perfectionism came from, right?
Mhm.
The desire to um, you know, make my mom proud and not feel like a burden and all these
Yeah.
things. So yeah.
Okay. I really resonate with that too, because I mean, like I've dealt with my own perfectionism for like with what you just said, like not wanting to feel like a burden. Like I grew up with an older sibling that had a lot of intense mental health and behavior concerns. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm the middle child. And
I hear
like,
you.
and so there's a lot of a time where I'm like, okay, I have to make myself as small as possible. I
Mm-hmm.
have to just make sure everything is fine. I was the mediator, the peacemaker, always known as the good kid and everything, the good student, all of that. And so there's very much that fear and shame of like, okay, if I go outside of this, if I mess up,
Mm-hmm.
then everything will crumble. And so
Yep.
you keep yourself in that cycle, even though you know it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't feel good. Like it's not a
Mm-hmm.
fun time to be in this perfectionism shame cycle.
Mm-hmm. It's just not, right? But it's held up.
Yeah.
It's held up because and from my perspective, because we're not taught authenticity. Like we're not taught the truth, really,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is that failure is a part of any cycle of anything,
Yeah.
right? Like messing up. And I did curse earlier, and I did not ask you if that was a thing
Go
I could
ahead. That's fine.
okay. Because listen, I really, like to be myself. Um, but I think the authenticity that
Mm-hmm.
we're not taught is okay, right? Like the
Yeah.
freedom to be ourselves instead of this like need to fit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like from the beginning, like and I think that in many ways that's human nature, right? Like
Yeah.
some of that is like that reptilian brain type stuff. Like of course you want to fit, like hierarchy and
Right.
needs, you want to belong. But I think we choose to belong to spaces like outside of ourselves, like
Mm-hmm.
external spaces, and at the cost of not belonging in the
Mm-hmm.
internal space,
Yeah.
right? Like and like so that self neglect,
Mm-hmm.
that happens.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely. Something
mm,
I've noticed too is with perfectionism in particular, it's so socially acceptable where to have things together, to be able
mm-hmm.
to show up 100% all the
Listen,
time.
yep,
It's praised and it's looked at as like, oh, you have it together. You know what you're doing.
yeah.
Look at
This is a
you.
societal paradigm. Like
Yeah.
this is not like a pocketed
Hmm.
experience. Like this is a thing that runs at the core of
Yeah.
our societal like culture and showing up and like expecting.
Hmm.
So like, yeah, it's some deep stuff.
Absolutely. What have you noticed, whether from your own work or just your own personal experience, are the biggest consequences of perfectionism? Because I think there's some people that are like, ah, not a big deal. Oh, you're too perfect at things. Whoop-de-doo, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Whoopity do, right?
yeah.
Mm-hmm. I hear you. I think it's quiet.
Yeah.
I think the consequences of perfectionism are very quiet until they're not.
Hmm.
The consequences of perfectionism are substance abuse.
Hmm.
The
Yeah.
consequences of perfectionism is like mental breakdown
Hmm.
or complete and utter disruption of nervous system functioning.
Yeah.
Like it is stress induced medical issues, right? Like
Hmm.
that's the consequence of
Yeah.
perfectionism. If like, and maybe people might hear this and think I'm being dramatic,
Hmm.
but the stress that you carry when you carry perfectionism and like the shame that comes from never being able to be perfect,
Hmm.
because think about that. A perfectionist is never perfect.
Right.
So they will always carry shame.
Hmm.
Right? And so
Absolutely.
there's always going to be a discrepancy
Hmm.
between what they expect of themselves and the world around them, honestly,
Yeah.
and what actually can be.
Hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
and so the level of just like unrealistic expectation and shame and stress and burden, like
Hmm.
it leads to not being able to fully be yourself, not ever really being able to fully feel loved because you
Hmm.
always feel like an imposter
Yeah.
because you're never reaching the goal.
Absolutely. I've noticed it too, just in like being able to be vulnerable
Oh yeah.
so hard. And
Oh
that even
yeah.
came up in my own work as a therapist, where there were
Mhm.
moments when I'm in a session with a
Oh
client and I'm
yeah.
noticing my own discomfort and hard time with
Mhm.
vulnerability is coming up in the session. And I'm like, I'm a therapist. This is my like
Mhm.
job to get comfortable in these moments. And it just
Mhm.
kind of penetrates everything.
It does. But I think some of that gets deepened for us in the
Hmm.
field
Oh yeah.
because some of the messages are echoed in our
Hmm.
field, right? Like some of the sort of expectation that we're given, like you said, is that, oh, I'm supposed to be able to feel to be okay with discomfort and like with
Hmm.
vulnerability and all these sorts of
True.
things, right?
Hmm. A good
And
point.
then, right, but then there's this other very different expectation,
Hmm.
right? Which is that you should not necessarily be showing up as like vulnerable, right?
Right.
That like you should be blank slate and like you
Mhm.
should be like able to show up for it or know
Hmm.
what to do with it and like you should have the answer or like all of these different expectations,
Yeah.
while also you should also be able to be human enough to sit in it's like sit comfortably
Hmm.
in vulnerability. Like what
Yeah.
is this expectation?
Too much.
It's too much.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's very true. It's interesting to what you said earlier about perfectionists never actually being perfect and always having that shame. Because something I realized in my own journey is I've kept a journal since I was very young. So I have this whole collection of journals and I was rereading them and I noticed I would just repeat the same thing like, oh, I wasn't able to do this, but I'll keep trying. And it was like this constant
Yeah.
conversation where I was always pushing myself and always being like, oh, I couldn't do this, but I'm going to keep doing it. And I continue to speak to myself that way for years. And I'm
I
like,
hear you.
I've never been able to do so. Like, why don't I just change the expectation instead of
Patient.
keep pushing myself?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I love that. Change the expectation, right? Change the expectation. I think that is a daily, hourly, minutely practice
Hmm.
sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
Because when you're used to having those like perfectionistic expectations, it has to be a choice to
Hmm.
challenge it. Like each time it's happening, it has to be not only a choice, you have to first of all be able to be aware enough to recognize that it is a
Yeah.
perfectionistic, like unrealistic expectation. Then
Hmm.
you have to be able to challenge that and replace it with a realistic
Hmm.
expectation. It's not
Yeah, absolutely. When did you realize that, like, oh, I'm a perfectionist. This is not working for me?
when was the aha moment? That's such a good question. Ooh, I remember when it was. Okay,
Oh,
so I don't know when this had to be like, I don't know when it was, but
yeah.
anyhow, it was a conversation I had with my husband. Okay,
Hmm.
and we were talking. I don't even remember like what the actual topic was or anything like that, right?
Hmm.
But I remember him saying something along the lines of like, I feel like I can never, like, no matter who I am or what I do, it could never be what you
Hmm.
needed to be. I
Yeah.
think he used the language insatiable. I was like,
Hmm.
ooh, ouch,
Hmm.
right? Like that thing hurt. It hit.
Hmm.
And I was like, dang. And so I really had to like go inward and reflect on like that. And I was like, wait a minute. I feel like that inside myself all the time.
Yeah.
So of course it feels like that for
Hmm.
him in relationship with me.
Right.
And so I think that was probably the like biggest, most defining aha moment that I can recall in
Hmm.
this moment. Um, yeah, it puts a chokehold on you and everyone else
Hmm.
around you.
Yeah, absolutely. It almost, to me, it almost feels like gambling, where you're kind of chasing this high almost of just like,
Uh-huh.
okay,
One oh, what an
I'm
analogy.
almost there. I'm gonna
That
get it.
is so true.
Everything is gonna fall into place. And because I had this moment when
Ah,
I was applying to grad schools and I had this idea in my mind, like if I go to a great grad school, then my parents will be proud of me. Then people will know I'm smart and not just like the good average kid. Like it'll just fulfill all of these things. And when that didn't happen, I'm just like, but this was the end goal. Like I put in
Right. That was what it was
and
supposed to
now what?
be. Oh, I feel you so like that really resonates so deeply. Because I think, at least for me, I can speak for me,
Mm-hmm.
that was how I was operating. And I think
Yeah.
my brain is still in many ways acclimating. So like
Mm-hmm.
again, I'm still like recovering from this
Right.
thing. Um, but I think for like that is how I viewed purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Like it really was how I viewed like the whole of life, like not just like one piece of it, like
Yeah.
the whole dang puzzle,
Mm-hmm.
right? The whole thing. Like it gets existential, I
Yeah.
think, when you think about it, because we have these goals in mind,
Mm-hmm.
and then we align our worth to it. We align the purpose of life to it. We align like
Mm-hmm.
so many. It carries a lot of weight.
Absolutely.
And so a lot of times when those crumble,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, what is this
Yeah.
even?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I see that so much too, just in the field and mental health and social work,
Mm,
kind of what you were saying earlier, with these different insane expectations of us, where I've seen many people that are like very new to the field, completely burnt out. And they're just like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Or
yeah. Mm,
maybe this isn't meant for me anymore, where it's like, no, no,
mm.
no, this is
I've heard
not
it
a
so
you problem.
often. Hmm. This is an us problem. Like all of us, we need to do something different.
Yeah.
Truly. Um, such a good point. Yeah. So one of the other things that I do is I supervise. And so and most of it is just through like folks that we hire at the business, but it's so interesting. Not interesting. I say interesting to be kind.
Yeah.
It's disappointing. Like it's
Mhm.
disheartening um
Yeah.
that none of them came to my practice with like, I'm feeling really good. Like I got a
Mhm.
system in place, right? Like I'm like my self-care plan
Mhm.
got it going on, right? Like I'm my human self is feeling good
Yeah.
to be here, right?
Mhm.
Like they all came from places of like extra woundedness
Mm.
because they were a human showing up in a therapist role,
Yeah.
right? Um And so it really is a complete and utter shared problem
Mhm.
across the board. Like I mean, I can't completely generalize it. I'm sure there's someone out there, right, that got through our field
Mhm.
unscathed by perfectionism.
True.
Okay, I don't know them though.
No. Yeah. What if, I mean, because you're kind of using this term recovering perfectionist, which I love. What have you used in your journey in recovery? Like, what does that even look like for you?
Ooh. So, I share this story all the time, like in
Mhm.
the Unshame, Untamed the Human Therapist group. Um, and it's really to help illustrate it.
Mhm.
But I had got into a space where my self-neglect and codependency stuff had gotten so bad for
Mhm.
my mental emotional health, um, that I had to go. Like I was like, I
Yeah.
need to do something. Like something is not right. Like I don't think I can survive this.
Mhm.
Right? Like it got bad. And so I chose to, right,
Mhm.
take a month in like an inpatient
Yeah.
space to get myself to a space where I could put myself, if not before, at least at the same level
Mhm.
of value and importance in terms of like showing up for, right, and self-care of and like rewire. It was like a rewiring of my brain,
Mhm.
right? So it was a month of very intense
Yeah.
um reset
Mhm.
situation, right? And then from there, because at first it was like, oh, I'm burnt out, and so I would take vacations, right?
Mm.
Or like, oh, I'm burnt out, I'll take a leave of absence, right? So like it would be, I would make these decisions, like, and then I would come right back, and
Yeah.
then it would be like, no, no,
Hmm.
something's still not right.
Yeah.
And so when I got back from that month-long program, what I had found out was that it was not um a burnout. It was a
Hmm.
misalignment, right? The codependency that I was carrying and that I was taught in terms of how to show up
Hmm.
created for me, um, what's the language? A level of self-neglect where my true self,
Yeah.
like who I am, what I want in life, like the things that make me happy, bring me joy,
Hmm.
became so like on the back burner, that it was a complete misalignment at
Yeah.
that point. So of course, when you go back, you're gonna feel, quote unquote, I'm doing like the
Hmm.
quotes, you're gonna feel burnt out because it's not right for you.
Yeah.
So anyway, I say all that to say, codependent no more. Please read that book.
Hmm.
I realized when I got to that program that I had given that book to so many people as a
Hmm.
resource and never read it. I was like, what is
Important.
wrong with me?
Hmm.
I knew the whole time that I struggled with codependency, but I'm like, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
I'm cool. Like, I got it covered, right? Because I'm like, I don't know. What do I think? Who do I think I am that I don't need to
Right.
recover from the right?
Hmm.
So anyway, codependent no more. It, was a huge part of that process.
Okay.
Doing my own shadow work type stuff of
Hmm.
um like journaling and being real with, like, actually being real with myself and
Yeah.
not like the fake real, right?
Hmm.
Like really, really like the ugly stuff. Like, ew,
Hmm.
you think that? That's crazy because you
Hmm.
me. Because I didn't know I thought that,
Yeah.
right? And I might have judged somebody else that thought that if I knew. So like having those types of conversations with
Hmm.
myself, doing inner child work, right? Remembering
Love it.
that. And I love that you brought this up earlier, Laura. You were like, um I still carry that with
Hmm.
me, like I still do that. And the thing about it is, the children in us don't go away.
Right.
They
Yeah.
still there, like they're still who we are.
Hmm.
And so this idea that when we grow up, quote unquote, like they like just grow into
Right.
us, like what?
Hmm.
That 14-year-old still exists, and she needs probably some reparenting or
Yeah.
something, because like something happened and
Hmm.
she's not feeling safe.
Yeah.
So I need to talk to her.
Absolutely.
Right? And so like doing some of the work that needs to be done
Hmm.
to have like an internal alignment,
Yeah.
right? So that perfect doesn't even feel like a thing you
Hmm.
want or need anymore. I'm not quite there yet. Right? But that's like the hope, right? I don't know.
Right.
We'll see.
It's a
But that's
journey.
probably, but honestly, that's a perfectionistic hope.
Right.
So listen at me. You see me catching it because
Hmm.
it's so ingrained, right?
Yeah.
So you still catch it.
Hmm.
Right? So like to reframe that, like if we're gonna really practice what we're preaching, right? If that perfectionistic expectation is like, oh, one day I'll get to a space where perfect is not even a thing
Mm.
that I'll even want, right? Maybe I'll reframe that to say, maybe perfect doesn't look that alluring to me,
Yeah.
as it used to, right? Maybe it doesn't feel like a must
Hmm.
anymore, right? Like,
Absolutely.
and recognizing that each stage is going to look different with that,
Hmm.
and expecting it to.
Absolutely. Do you often find that like perfectionism and codependency come together, or does
For
that just
me,
depend?
yeah.
Hmm.
For me, it does. Think, I think it depends. So
Yeah.
there are so many different, like symptoms, or like, I don't know what language is the right language, quote unquote, to use.
Right.
But of codependency, like so
Hmm.
many different ways that it can show up for people.
Right.
So I wouldn't say that, but I think they probably go hand in hand for a lot of folks.
Hmm.
Codependency can take so many faces. It can look like the need to be needed.
Yeah.
It can look like self-neglect. It can look like um control. Like
Hmm.
I think people forget about that piece of it.
Yeah.
My mom, I love her. I love her real bad, right? My mom's codependency is controlling
Hmm.
um, because she wants to live it for you
Right.
because she doesn't trust you to live it,
Hmm.
right? And so I would say perfectionism shows up in many of those, but it looks so different, right?
Yeah.
Like depending on um like who the person is and all that sort of
Right.
thing, right?
Absolutely. It's so interesting that you just say like the need to be needed, because I
Mm-hmm.
think especially in any kind of helping profession,
Mm-hmm.
it's like that's just the
Mm-hmm.
job. And I think
Mm-hmm.
there's so many people that don't
Mm-hmm.
even realize they're codependent to the profession,
For
where
sure.
they're like, oh, like I
For
have to do
sure.
the work. I have to help people. I have to do this
For sure.
internal
It's
reason.
their purpose. Like I
Hmm.
was there. Like it
Yeah.
was my purpose,
Hmm.
right? Like I
Absolutely.
tied everything to
Yeah.
it. Mm-hmm.
That's where, I mean, I started to notice too, kind of going back when I got burnt out very shortly after I graduated grad school. And I started having those same thoughts of like, is this even meant for me? Like I was supposed to be the social worker immune to burnout, you know? And I mean, it kind of got to that point where I'm like, like why? Like it was my whole identity. And I had to
Mm-hmm.
realize, oh, I can have a life outside of this. And that doesn't mean I don't like social work anymore. I don't like helping people, but I
Mm-hmm.
can breathe and I can have things that are
Mm-hmm.
interesting that are not this.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And even if one day in life you get to a space where you say, I don't like social work
Yeah,
anymore, that still doesn't mean that you're not a good person. Right. So
absolutely.
it goes even deeper than that,
Hmm.
right? That like that, yes, that is my truth right now. And one
Hmm.
day that could change.
Yeah, very true.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen the word like codependency used a lot too, especially with social media. I think there's kind of these cycles of psychology words that are thrown into the mix. Do you ever see any misconceptions about codependency?
Um, I don't know, and like off the top of my head that I would say there are any like specific misconceptions that I know
Mhm.
of, but what I have found is that most people don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Um, like most people just genuinely have no idea what codependency is.
Hmm.
And so talk about misconceptions. I don't have a conception of it because
True.
I don't know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. So that's been my experience for the most part.
Yeah.
I think past that, I think a lot of folks have thought in the past that codependency had to be if you were like a person tied to somebody with substance abuse
Yeah.
issues. So that's definitely a misconception that I think is really like we're getting past at this point. I think
Hmm.
we know that we can be codependent without um having someone in our lives who is a substance abuser. But
Yeah.
um what I mean, one thing that I would like to say, I don't know if it's a misconception, but one thing that I would like to say is an important piece of it is that codependency is a learned behavior.
Mm.
It is used to meet a need,
Yeah.
right? And so anything that is a learned behavior can be unlearned,
Hmm.
but I think a lot of people feel stuck in it.
Yeah.
Like this, like, and I get it, like,
Hmm.
because a lot of the times when you like really genuinely struggle with codependency,
Hmm.
it really isn't, again, it's not just one part of your life.
Right.
Like it's really like all encompassing a lot of the
Hmm.
time. And so it really is a very challenging thing to move through, but it's not impossible. There is Coda. I go to Coda.
Yeah.
I love it. I can feel it when I'm not going.
Hmm.
Because it really is a recovery process, like
Yeah.
just like you would view any other recovery process, because in many ways it is an addiction. Like you said,
Hmm.
it really, when you brought up gambling, I was like, oh man, that really resonates. Like that's such a good analogy. Because when I'm on the blackjack table, that's
Hmm.
anyway. Um, but um, but yeah, I sort of lost my train of thought there.
You're
But
good. I mean, we brought in shame a little bit earlier.
Mhm.
What's the difference between shame and guilt? And like, how does that
Mm,
really perpetuate this cycle here with codependency and
mhm.
perfectionism?
Yeah, so Brene Brown, okay, if I ever
Yes.
get to be her one day, come on, talk about a goal. But anyway, she is really where I got a lot of my, I guess, philosophy
Hmm.
around shame and guilt. Right? And of course I've tested it, against my own
Right.
experience and like the folks that I work with and stuff. But shame is what she describes as how you view yourself,
Hmm.
and guilt is how you view that thing you did, right?
Hmm.
So, if I make a mistake, right, or if I do something that is like misaligned with my value system or whatever, right, or I hurt
Hmm.
somebody or whatever, right? Shame says, oh my gosh, I suck. Like, I'm trash as a friend. Like,
Hmm.
what is wrong with me? I need to check. Like, something is genuinely wrong with me, right? And I believe that,
Hmm.
right? Guilt is, damn, like I really shouldn't have did that. That was wild.
Mm.
I'm gonna learn from that though. I'm gonna learn
Yeah.
from that because that's crazy. I don't ever want to feel that again. I don't ever want to make you feel that because I am sorry. Like
Hmm.
I genuinely apologize. That's not who I am,
Right.
and I love you. I'm so sorry.
Hmm.
Right?
So
So
guilt can definitely be more guiding, and kind of be
mhm.
like, okay, like it's
It's
not,
an
we'll
adaptive
grow.
emotion. Yeah, it's an
Hmm.
adaptive emotion. Shame is maladaptive.
Hmm.
Guilt is an adaptive emotion. Like it's there to teach you something.
Yeah.
Right? And what it's teaching you is like, dang, that didn't feel good. Ooh,
Hmm.
I don't want to do that no more, right? I don't want to do it anymore.
Hmm. Absolutely. Interesting. Okay. Because I think that's where I've noticed a lot of people, at least with the work that I do, they don't know even that difference between like shame and guilt, and they just
Mm-hmm.
want to like get rid of any uncomfortable feelings at
Any
all.
discomfort, yeah.
I'm like, well,
Mm-hmm.
it's okay to be
That's that
uncomfortable. It's
perfectionistic
okay.
stuff too.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's that
absolutely.
perfectionistic stuff too. Mhm.
Yeah. Now, what does self-neglect look like? Because that was a term that you used
Mm.
earlier, kind of playing a role in perfectionism. So what does that
Yeah.
mean to you?
So yeah, I mean, it is any time that you are choosing, like, even if it's subconsciously,
Hmm.
because sometimes it's not just like an active, intentional choice. Sometimes it is on a subconscious level because I'm so used to doing that.
Right.
Um, but any time that there's a choice made to neglect a need or even a desire,
Hmm.
right, of yours in order to show up the way you feel you quote unquote should,
Hmm.
right? It's anytime that I put that should before my real,
Yeah.
okay? Or and it's honestly, even if it's not um just a should in that like supposed to way, like that like what's the word I'm looking for? Even if it's more specific than that, right? Like even if it's like to meet your need, I neglect my need,
Right.
and I'm doing that constantly,
Hmm.
right? And that's a pattern for me, that's self-neglect.
Hmm. Absolutely. That's so, I mean, again, it like reminds me of just the profession that we're in,
Yeah.
where
And
we're
mm-hmm.
told, like we have to show up for people, where
Yeah.
it feeds into that savior complex I think many people in
Yes.
helping professionals
Yes.
have,
I'm so glad you brought that up.
where it's just like, oh, I have to be there. I have to be the one. And that
Yeah.
was exactly why I stayed in my first job in community mental health for so long, was because I was like, no one else no one else is going to help these clients. I'm clearly the only one that can do it.
And it's so grandiose. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things I've realized about it. It's some grandiose shit.
Absolutely.
You think, who do I think I am? Huh? That I'm like, they can't get no help nowhere else because I'm so special.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
Mhm.
It's wild. And then so much of that too is just fed into just the systems that we work in. Like in mental health and social
Uncertainty.
work, like administration, especially if you're not working in a really supportive place, they'll feed into it. And they'll feed
Absolutely.
into the shame and the guilt that's there
That's
to
what I'm
just keep you
saying. It's
there.
ridiculous.
Mm.
Our field, and I talk about this a lot on my page, and I'm trying to start some shit. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I really am trying to start some stuff
Yeah.
so that we can shake some stuff up, because this field is not as safe as as you
No.
think it is. It's just not.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm trying to make sure that I stay away from like the victimhood mentality of that.
Right.
But that's the reality of the situation.
Hmm.
Is that our field is really shitty
Hmm.
at challenging stuff that is toxic for our mental and emotional health.
Yeah.
Like, it's really bad at
Hmm.
it. In fact, it's actually very good at like echoing
Hmm.
hello. And so we got it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very much like promoting the band-aids, like take a bubble bath, take a
Truly,
vacation,
truly,
but like definitely get used to not being paid, get used to high
truly.
caseloads, get used to all this extra
Come
stuff
on.
that'll ruin your quality of life.
And who's gonna stay?
Yeah. I mean, no wonder
Right?
there's so much turnover and people going into like the
Mhm.
private sector
I'm
because
telling
that's how you're
you.
able to have a life that you actually
Mhm.
enjoy.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mm.
And it doesn't have to be so. So
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, wow. What is just one piece of advice you would give to whether it's people that are not in the field recovering from perfectionism, codependency, or also just like other professionals that are dealing with it too?
yeah, specifically I would say for clinicians and like professionals in the helping field, um, find yourself a space and or a mentor in the field that um challenges some of the
Mhm.
stuff that we talked about today, right? That actively and intentionally challenges it, because if you don't, you will go in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Like, that's just the reality. Like, if
Hmm.
you do not have something that is actively and intentionally and safely challenging some of the stuff that's going on in our field, or it's challenging some of the echoes, right, that are going on
Hmm.
in our field, that's all you'll hear,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And so please find yourself a safe space to
Hmm.
talk like we're talking right here, right now, right?
Totally.
Um, and I'm gonna go ahead and do a drop a promotion, and
Go ahead.
that safe space could be Branches of Life's Unshame and Untamed the Human Therapist program, where
Absolutely.
this is very much the vibe
Hmm.
of that group. And then we also do a lot of work on like accountability, like holding ourselves
Right.
accountable for doing what we
That's
need to do
huge.
out
Yeah.
of it. So that's for like professionals specifically.
Hmm.
Um, for everybody else, I say like, and like not just everybody else, everybody period, because
Yeah.
therapists are a part of this piece too. So don't like stop listening because you're a
Hmm.
human. Right? Just because I don't
Yes.
say therapist, I want you to still hear me because you're a
Hmm.
person and you're a part of the human community. Okay. Um, I think doing careful and curious, like non-judgmental,
Hmm.
um, investment or investigation, I mean,
Yeah.
assessment of self, like, and where you like alignment,
Hmm.
like really ask yourself, like, is what is happening around like in my life aligned with like my inner self,
Hmm.
or did I completely neglect myself to be right here?
Yeah.
right? And what does that mean for me? Okay. Ask yourself, right? Does anything in this podcast episode today sound like me?
Mm.
Do I hear any of those voices in my head that Laura and Danielle talked about today?
Mm-hmm.
If so, you might struggle with some perfectionism and know that. Because if you don't like own and accept that about yourself, you will never recover from it because you will just stay stuck in it. Just because you don't look at it doesn't make it not so.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
So look at your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, please investigate. Look at your stuff. Um, and then start doing the self-care practices. Like, not just like Laura said, not just the Band-Aid ones. The
Mm-hmm.
Band-Aid ones are real cute. I love
Yeah,
me a good Band-Aid
that's
every
great.
now and again. To be honest, okay? But also, like there's a difference between the self-suit, like what am I saying? Those are like self-indulging moments,
Mm-hmm.
right? Those are like self-soothing moments. Those are like self-regulating moments, right? Like that's like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And also there's that long-term self-care,
Yeah.
right? There's that you that's inside of you that wants to own a business but has listened to their supervisor of 17 years tell them that they are needed at this
Mm.
at this nonprofit organization that would never be able to go on without them.
Mm-hmm.
Huh? So like the self-care also looks like, I need to hurt myself in this moment because this is going to hurt me. This is going
Mm-hmm.
to be a loss for me
Yeah.
in order to do that thing that I know will make me actually happier as
Mm-hmm.
a human. Right? So looking
Absolutely.
out for future you, looking out for future you, sometimes at the discomfort of
Yeah.
present you. That's self-care too.
Absolutely. That's so important too, because it's so easy to just want to, again, like avoid the discomfort and be like, oh, no, I'll just like give in. I'll do whatever they want
Yep,
so I don't
yep,
feel uncomfortable.
yep, yep. And
Mm.
we do that with ourselves too.
Yeah.
And so we teach ourselves not to trust ourselves with the long-term stuff sometimes. I
Hmm.
know that happens. That I'm still sort of rebuilding trust with self. Because I had become very self-indulgent instead of like the self-care,
Yeah.
right? Like I wasn't fully looking out for future self. And um, I think we teach ourselves that we will give ourselves that whatever the thing is in the moment,
Hmm.
and we won't actually show up for the uncomfortable thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. Well, Danielle, this has been so helpful. I mean, this is like, I think, such an important talk so many people need, especially in this field,
Mm,
because again, like we're
I
taught
agree.
and echoed so many things that just perpetuate this
Mhm.
cycle.
Truly.
For people that are listening, where can they continue to follow you? Anything you want to
Oh,
plug right now?
please, please, please. Yes. I love to have folks join me on all of my platforms. I have YouTube, The Human Behind the Therapist. I have Instagram that is branches.of.life.llc. I have TikTok, which I think is the same, branches.of.life.llc.
Mm-hmm.
Our website is www.branchesoflifetherapy.com.
Nice.
And we also have an Eventbrite page,
There we go.
and that is Branches of Life LLC on there as well. You can also just put my name in there, Danielle Branche-Brown, and you'll be able to see we have a self-care academy there for
Mm-hmm.
all humans. This isn't just for therapists, this is for all humans. Um, and it's basically like a gym membership,
Oh,
right?
great.
You pay for it, and then you can come to all of the different self-care events and classes and things like that that we offer throughout the month.
Oh, I love that.
We have like a crafting corner that we do. That's my favorite thing right now.
Love it.
Where I'm teaching people how to like bead bracelets. It's real cute. Like
Hmm.
it's like not it's not like a complicated self-care does not always have to be super duper complicated,
No.
right? Because that's just creating. And then we have the movement therapy classes that we do, where we incorporate yoga and dance and things like that to help people uh, take care of themselves physically, emotionally, and that mind-body
Yeah.
connection. We have like meditation classes that we do. We have a gratitude circle that's
Mhm.
coming up soon. Um, Writing activities. I mean, all kinds of stuff.
Amazing.
And we have like guests that come in and do stuff. We have someone who come in next month to teach us bath. What is she doing? Bath scrubs.
Oh,
So bath scrubs for self care. Anyway, so that's me
oh, I
doing
love
a lot
that.
of things.
Doing a lot. There we go. Wonderful. And all that stuff for those listening will be linked below so you can easily just pursue any of that. And if anything resonated with you today, please feel free to like, comment, share, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much, Danielle.
Thank you, Laura. I appreciate the space.